Hello.
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 Students, we request you to
Good
keep
evening,
yourself
sir.
on mute.
Hello. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening,
Good
sir.
evening.
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Hello.
Sir, ভালো আছেন স্যার?
Hello everyone, a very good evening to all of you. We request you to please keep yourself on mute. We will be starting the session shortly. We'll be starting the session in the next 5 minutes. So please maintain the decorum. We don't want to remove any of you if there will be like any kind of nuisance. So please maintain the decorum and yeah, we'll be starting the session in next 5 minutes. We will address all your queries and important doubts related to internship, data analytics internship. And then we will go with Masterclass 2 of today's session. So yes, so please be patient. Thank you. Please ask your teammates and other members to join the Masterclass 2. Alright. A very good evening to each one of you. Thank you so much to all the interns for taking part today in Masterclass 2 of Data Analytics Internship Program. We welcome you all on behalf of CSRBOX and IBM SkillsBuild team. So yes, so before we start Masterclass 2, let us just I just want to address a few doubts and I'll just share my screen so that there are so many students who are saying that we want to add new members, we want to, remove old members. Then there are students who are saying that how can we complete the learning plan? But we have received a very good overwhelming response where we have seen that more than 2,200 students have already finished the learning plan of both the internships. And apart from that, more than 400 plus students, there are so many students who have already finished, and a lot of you have already finished more than 80% of the learning plan. So I just encourage all of you to just keep it up and also join all the master classes. We are also going to discuss the flow of the internship in today's session. So let us start this session with the important queries that have been asked by most of you. So I will just share my screen so that it will be easy for each one of us to understand. I hope all of you can see my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, Anjali, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. All right. So let us first start with this form. We have recently shared this form because a lot of you have asked, it is already mentioned by my team that we have extended the deadline for the concept note as well as for the completion of the learning plan. So I just want to encourage all of you who have already finished more than 80%. Please ensure that you are finishing it. And and a lot of you have requested to extend the deadline. So considering that request, we have extended the deadline, and now you can submit it by 10th of July instead of 8th of July. So the last date for submitting all your deliverables is 10th of July. So yes, so you just need to finish the learning plan as well as finish the learning plan as well as submit your concept note by 10th of July. So yeah, so we have taken into consideration all your requests and we have done that. So now what is this in form? So we have already shared the bit.ly link of this form, which is called internship participant form. And what are you all going to do? I'm just going to give you a demo of this form so that it will be clear to all of you. So a lot of you also want to add new members, or you don't want old members to be part of your team anymore. That is okay. So taking into consideration all those requests and queries and doubts of all the interns, we have created this form where you need to you need to submit your final, I'll just give you a sample. So first you need to select the internship that you are part of. If you are part of data analytics, please select that. And after that, you need to fill in your college or institute name. Here, you will find a long list. So please don't be scared by seeing that long list. You can just scroll down and find the name of your college. After that, it will give you college location, and you need to select that. Then if you have even two members, a lot of you are saying that we are not finding teammates. How can we create a team? Some of you want to create a new team. So we have taken that as well into consideration. And now, even if you are two people, you can form a team. But if you are alone, if you are solo, then you are not allowed to participate in the internship. So please have one more member and then you can take part. And you need to select the number of members who are part in your team. This is the sample of the certificate that all of you need to submit. So this form has to be filled by the team leader, or we can say spoke of every team. So you just need to fill this form, and after filling this form, you yeah, give me a minute. Yeah. So yes. So then you need to write the team name. So you can use either old team name, which you earlier submitted, or new, if you want to change the team name, that's okay. But This is going to be allowed only for once, only through this form. We are not going to again allow you to add new members, remove old members, or change your team name. So please ensure this form is compulsory for every team who is participating in data analytics internship. Please ensure that all of you are filling this form. It is compulsory for every team. All of you are filling this form and fill it with the final details, final team name. And then after that, you need to submit the concept note. Now, a lot of you have, sent us this query that we are not like how the concept note would look like, even though we have already discussed it in masterclass as well as Q&A session. So for your reference, we have given the link here as well for as a sample, so that you can just have a look on it. And then we have the name of the spoke. So yeah, so let me just give you a demo of this form, how this form would look like. Suppose you are giving your college location. This is a college location. This is the college name. And after that, you have selected like three members. And then you are saying that the name of the team, suppose, is team, suppose Roger. Okay. And after that, you need to submit a concept note here. So this is compulsory. So give me a minute. Yeah. Yeah. So suppose you just submit this, and after submitting this, you need to write, the team leader needs to write his name, his or her name. Suppose you have written some name, and then you're going to next. Next, it will take the team details. So some of you, or a lot of you, are just filling the first page and then are not able to navigate to the next page. So you just need to click on next. Then you need to click name of the spoke or team group leader, email ID of the spoke. After clicking on this, contact number, then upload your certificate. You need to upload your certificate screenshot for course completion. So please ensure you are doing that. Every team member has to submit this: name of the second team member, name of the third team member, email ID of all the team members, and their certificate screenshot. This you have to do before 10th of July or by 10th of July maximum. 10th July is the deadline. Taking into consideration your exams and various other schedules, we have extended it to 10th July. So please ensure that if you have finished, even if you are 50% or 80%, please ensure that you are finishing this learning plan by 10th of July. So that is one part, which is about this form, which has to be filled by every team. So yes, so please ensure you are filling this form. Why? Because we want the final detail of all your team members, and you just fill the teammates who are like finally part of your team, and then submit this form with us. Yeah. Now, next is, a lot of you have said that, we have made changes. A lot of you have said that we are not able to finish some learning activity, or there are, less options. So for that, for your ease and, to make it simple for you, we have also updated the learning plan, and we have made it simple and easy for all of you, so that you can finish the learning plan and it won't be a huge task for all of you. So the first is, in section 1, instead of completing 6 activities, now you just need to complete any 5. Earlier you had to complete all 6. Now we have simplified it, made it little easy, and so you just need to finish 5. Then in section 2, earlier there was, there were just 4 activities, out of which you had to finish 2. Now we have given you more options. If you have not done the learning plan, now you have 8 activities in section 2. So you need to do but just 2. So, but please ensure, and then section 3, 1. Please ensure that total learning hours of section 1 and section 2 will be 12 to 13 hours, not lesser than that. Please ensure that you are doing that. For example, suppose you are doing here data analysis Khan Academy 1 hour. This is 3 hours, and you are finishing all these courses. Okay, 5 courses of this and then 2 courses of this. Please ensure you are in total completing 12 to 13 hours of learning plan activity, learning hours of these 2 sections, and ensure that you are attending all these 3 sections of the learning plan. Then a lot of you have personally texted us or sent us an email that how are we going to, I want to be a part of the WhatsApp group, or I have missed the masterclass, or I need the some sample concept note, but we have already, shared a common link document with all of you. So it is not so that it will be in one place, and you don't need to actually be confused or lost when you are not finding something. So for that, and we are not able to reply to everyone's queries, because we are getting overwhelming messages and responses, and sometimes even the calls. So because of that, we have shared this document. We are going to share it once again today in the group. Please ensure that you are referring to this document, which is DA important links and resources. We will share the bit.ly link of this document. We have also put the registration forms link as well in this form. So please ensure that you are referring this. So I'll just show you here. We have made it in red color for those of you who want to, who have made changes in the team members. Like earlier there were 3, now there are 4 or 2, and then you want to change your team name or whatever. You need to submit your certificate, your final team registration and concept note submission on this link. That is why we have made it in red color, because this is the latest link and we don't want any of you to miss out on this. Please ensure you are finishing this before 10th of July. So yes, so that is about the learning plan, about the registration form, which has to be filled. Once again, I'll just show you the registration form. This is the registration form. Please ensure you are filling this registration form. This is final registration form. Whatever you are going to fill in this form, we are going to take that only for issuing even the final internship certificate, which is going to be issued in the end. So please ensure you are filling this properly. Every team is filling, no one is missing out on this. Spokes, please ensure you are filling this form, all the team leaders. So that is about important things about the internship. And apart from that, we have also give me a minute. Yes, apart from, so I have already discussed the learning plan. Then concept note. Concept note has to be just 1-page concept note or maximum 2-page. Please do not panic. A lot of you are confused. So I just want to encourage those of you who have finished the learning plan. Please start working on your projects. Please start working on your projects, which you will be showing, showcasing in the end during pitch night. And so please start working on that. Others who are working on concept note, it is just a 1-pager, just like an abstract of a book or abstract of a project. You just need to do that. And apart from that, those of you, even if you are getting open SkillsBuild or EduNet or DGT or any of that in the organization name while registering on SkillsBuild platform, that is okay. We will share a Google form by Monday, so next week, where we will take your details and we will help you to get transferred to our link, our SkillsBuild platform. So please do not panic. Please don't worry. We will consider that if you have finished the learning plan on SkillsBuild platform, but the organization name was different. It was EduNet or it was Open SkillsBuild or Digity or anything. So yeah. Then, as we have already mentioned initially as well, that we are going to share your profiles under JVTM profiling module. So yes, so we will share Google form where every student has to submit their profiles. And once you complete the learning plan, we will also align you with potential employment opportunities. And so please ensure you are finishing your learning plan and concept note by next week or next to next week. We will take your resumes where we will help you to align with the employment opportunities based on your area of interest in this field, data analytics field. So please ensure that you are finishing your learning plan as well as submitting your concept note by 10th of July so that we can start taking your profiles. Apart from that, today is Masterclass 2. And on Sunday, we will have Masterclass 3 of Data Analytics Internship Program. Next week, we will have another Masterclass, which will be again on Data Analytics Internship Program. And then in the end, we will also would have another Masterclass where it will be, we will discuss about that later on. So yeah, so that's it from our end. I just wish you all the best. And I wish you happy learning in all these masterclasses. Please ensure that you are attending all these master classes and doing it well. So yes, so now let me just welcome today's speaker. So give me a minute. Yeah. So we have in our midst Ms. Jayati Kaushik. So Jayati Kaushik, so we welcome you, Jayati. So Jayati is an assistant professor in St. Joseph's College, Bangalore, Karnataka. And Jayati is very much proficient in machine learning, in deep learning, in NLP, data science, algebra for data science design and guide data science projects. Apart from that, Jayati has done her Bachelor's of Science in Statistics, Mathematics, and Economics from St. Joseph's College, Bangalore. And Jayati has done her Master's of Science in Mathematics from TUK, Germany. So that's a little bit of introduction about Jayati. We welcome you, Jayati. Thank you so much for taking out time and taking up today's session. So yeah, so over to you, Jayati.
Thanks for that great introduction. So I hope I'm audible to everyone. Is the audio okay?
Yes, you are audible, Jayati.
Okay,
There's
perfect.
a little bit of background disturbance, noise. Yeah,
I think that could be the fan.
I guess yes. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's start today's session. So I've been told that you guys have already had one masterclass where you discussed the basics of data science and so on. And today we will be discussing first a little bit about using Python. So we will get into the basics of Python. And then depending on how the class goes, I will give you a peek into actually the using Python for different things for data science, right? So the idea for today is to start with what is data analysis, move into a little bit of basics of Python, and then check out how we can use Python for data science, right? So let me just share my screen here so that all right, hopefully my screen should be visible.
Yes, it is visible, Jayati.
Perfect. All right. So, what is let's start with what is data analysis and why do we even bother with data analysis and what is data science and why we bother with data science, right? So, what is data analysis and what does a data analyst do? See, we live in a world in which we are generating massive amounts of data every day, right? And this data has a lot of information to offer us. The problem is to make sense of this data, and this is actually a really big problem. It's not always easy to have a lot of data and to be able to make sense of this data or to be able to find any useful information or insight from this data. This is where data science and data analysis comes into picture, right? A data analyst typically will work with a lot of structured data and will help solve very tangible business problems. The tools that he or she will typically use will be something like SQL or R or Python, right? Or sometimes we might want to use some kind of data visualization software, and very often we will use some level of statistical analysis to help us gain insights into our data, right? And these can be any kind of insights, right? It could be something as simple as, oh, on Friday the sales of a certain product increase, and maybe I want to keep more of this product in stock at my shop to make sure that I am meeting the needs of my customers, right? And something like this is not always very obvious if I am just looking at, say, a year's worth of sales data. But as a data analyst, it becomes your job to make sense of it and to give me this insight and tell me that, oh, the sales of, say, popcorns increases on Friday evenings, potentially because everyone's at home watching movies or going out watching movies, right? Okay, so what specific tasks could a data analyst perform to generate these insights? On a day-to-day level, you might be collaborating with organizational leaders or other parts of your organization to identify what are the needs, right, of the organization or the team or the project. You would acquire data from sources, right? We can talk a lot about what to do with any given data, but first step will always be to get your hands on this data. And this can be from either primary sources where you go out and conduct surveys and you go out and ask questions and collect forms, or it can be secondary sources where somebody has done these steps and you just pull a lot of data from a lot of different sources and you make a giant data set to do the analysis that you require, right? Once you have the data set itself, right, what would the next step be? The next step would be to clean and reorganize this data, right? Unclean data or unorganized data will very rarely lead to good insights. And cleaning your data involves a lot of different steps, which I hope you've already seen or we will see in our next masterclass, but I'll just go through some of them quickly. So cleaning requires maybe, for example, taking care of empty spaces, right? You get survey forms and you see that a lot of people have left some questions empty, right? Or for example, you're filling the forms for this internship and somebody might want to check out what kind of students are coming in this internship, and we might find that a lot of students have, say, left out age information, right? So you have to figure out how to deal with missing information, for example, right? You have to deal with maybe, say, wrong information that somebody might have typed in by accident, right? Maybe somewhere on a form it asked you for your age, but you misread it and typed the birth year instead. Suddenly, I'm looking at a student whose age is 1994, right? And that makes no sense. And if I keep that in my data set, it's going to lead to problems in the insights that I can get. So all of these different things where you check data and make sure that you've taken care of missing values, you've taken care of redundant information, you have made sure that it's in a form that a computer will be able to deal with it. All of these parts constitute of cleaning and reorganizing your data and preparing it for analysis so that you can work on it. Okay, you have your data, you've cleaned it. Next step will be to actually sit down and analyze this data. And what is the whole point of analyzing this data is you will try to see trends or patterns. And you want trends and patterns which offer some level of actionable insight, right? For example, like I said, if somebody spots that I sell absurdly high amounts of popcorn at my shop on Fridays, this is an actionable insight for me where I might want to, say, buy more popcorns on Fridays to make sure I can keep up with customer demands. Or maybe I can play around with the price of popcorns given that I know there is demand, and I can increase profits for myself, right? So whatever trends or patterns that you find have to be then translated into actionable insights, right? It's not enough to say that I made a graph and I I notice an increasing trend. You have to figure out what that increasing trend might mean for the organization or for your project that you are working on. Right. Finally, the last step in this process after you're done, translating your patterns and trends into actionable insights is to present these insights in a way that is easy to understand and that can inform data driven decisions, right? So you want to always present your findings in a way that the other person can understand them and in a way that the other person is able to act on them. Otherwise, what is the point, right? I give you an insight. I say that all the students in this, uh, you know, masterclass are present, but okay, so what? Yeah, they are present. It's happening. There are students, right? But what I want to do is I want to create actionable insights, right? I want to say most people in this class are, say, maybe from a math background. So they may require more time to do computing tasks. Or the other way around, I might want to figure out that, or I might figure out that most people in this masterclass are from a computer science background and they might want to spend more time doing modeling than studying coding, right? So these are actionable insights that can inform my decisions in how I might conduct the next class, for example, right? Okay, so I hope all of this made sense so far. Given all this, what are the tools that we can use for doing our analysis, for creating these insights, for presenting these insights? And one of the most popular tools right now happens to be Python, right? So it is used very widely also in conjunction with things like SQL and R. And today, what we do is we look at some basics of the programming language Python, right? And the way that I will structure it is I will first go through the slides, and then what we will do is we will quickly switch to a Jupyter notebook that I have created for this class, and we will go over some code together just to see how it really works. All right. Okay. So let's start with the basics of Python. I hope most of you have done some level of programming at some point in your lives, right? If not, that's also not an issue at all. In any programming language, we want to start with having, say, a variable, right? And what do I want to do? Ultimately, I want to store information, right? That is what we are doing. We have some data, we want to store it in Python, and we want to do things with it. So let's start small. Let's just take one variable, and can I assign some value to this one variable, right? So okay, so let's see. Can I scroll? Okay, perfect. So I can have any variable, right? And I just want to store some value in this variable. Say I want to store the number 9, right? How can I do that? I can just use either the assignment operator, which is the equal to sign. So I would say something like a is equal to 9. And now what has happened is that the value 9 is stored in in some place in the memory, and I can call it by this name A. right? So what I've done is I've created a variable A, and in this variable, I have stored the value 9. There is also a built-in way to do this in Python, and I can simply use also a print statement, right? Okay, so print is one way of assignment. Print is also just to print things. So if I say A is equal to 9, and if I say, for example, print A, this will give me the output of 9, right? And we'll soon look at a Jupyter notebook of the same and go through codes together. So if something gets a little confusing, don't worry too much about it. If it gets too confusing, feel free to stop, right? Okay, so assignment operator, very simple. You create a variable and you can assign or store a value in this variable. Okay, these can be anything. So for example, here was a number 9, but I can also store anything. I can store my name, for example, or I can store just the letter J, for example, right? And we will see that in fact it can be much bigger things that you can store in variables or assign to variables, and this makes the process of working with data easy, right? All right. So what kind of data can I use in Python? There are a few different types of or data types in Python, and we will look at all of them, or at least most of them, and we will see how to play around with them a little bit. So you can have numbers in Python, you can work with numbers. These can be either integers, which are your whole numbers 1 2 3 4 5, or the negative numbers -1 -2 -100, right? Or you can have floating points. And what are floating points? These are essentially all the decimal numbers. So these are all the decimals. So for example, 3.1 is a floating point or a float data type in Python. Why is it called floating point? From what I've read, it's because the decimal floats around. I think that's one of the reasons. I could be wrong here. So between int and float, you take care of pretty much most of the real numbers, right? Okay, so Python can work with numbers. What else can it work with? It can work with something like a string. So you can have numbers or you can have alphabets, right? And when you want to store alphabets or sentences, or say I wanted to store my name, or I wanted to store a sentence data types in Python, I would use a string type variable. All right, good so far? Okay, so I have numbers, I have alphabets. What else can I do, right? You might think that's all, but in fact, I can do a little bit more. I can have a list of numbers, or I can have a list of alphabets, or I can have a list of numbers and alphabets, right? And these come in two ways. They are either lists or tuples, and we will see what the difference between the two is once I open the Jupyter notebook. But for now, know that they are both just lists of things, right? And these can be anything. They can be numbers, they can be strings. You can potentially have a list of lists and so on, right? Okay, we also have two other interesting data types, which are sets and dictionaries. So what is a set? If you are aware of a mathematical set, this works rather the same way. Okay, so for example, you can perform operations like unions, intersections, joins, disjoints, all of those things, right? And it behaves exactly like a set in math behaves. And again, we'll discuss this a little bit more once I get to the notebook, but a set essentially is different from a list or a tuple in the sense that a set is not ordered. So not ordered, and you will not be able to really have duplicates in sets, right? So say if I have a set of three numbers, 111, really that's just a set of 1, right? But a set of two numbers, say 1 and 2, is a set of two different numbers. Okay, so small things, sometimes they can be very useful in certain situations, uh, and something good to know. All right, dictionary is another type of another data type in Python, and what this allows you to do is it allows you to create a kind of an ordered list which lets you associate a key with some information, right? So for example, I could create a dictionary of, say, the people in this classroom, and for each person I would have an entry, right? So I would say, for example, me, name Jayati Kaushik, date of birth so and so, uh, age so and so, so on and so forth. So then I can access individual information about myself using dictionaries. So I could say name and it would return Jayati Kaushik, right? So these are the different, some of the different data types in Python that come in handy, and you will learn more as you go along this internship and see how we mess around and play with data. So you will learn things like what is a data frame, or maybe use an array, and so on and so forth. And it can be a lot of fun. Okay. Right. The next thing that we will look at while dealing with still the basics of Python is conditional statements, right? So what is a conditional statement? It gives a condition and it tells my program what I want to do. Right? So, for example, I might say if girl, print female, right? So, if the condition is satisfied that the input is girl, my program will print females. Okay, so all you do is you have a block of code, and if a site criteria is satisfied, you run this block of code. Okay, there are different kinds of conditional statements. So you can see 3 on the slide here. So there is a simple if, which is if A is satisfied, do B, right? If light green, drive ahead. There is an if else. So if A, do B, otherwise do C, right? So if you know how to write a conditional, use it, otherwise don't. Okay, so the difference between if and if else is that in the if case, assuming a condition is satisfied, the code knows what to do and it stops there, right? If else gives you what to do in case the condition is not satisfied. So it doesn't stop at the point where the condition is not satisfied, it goes to the next line, it checks, oh, if this condition is not satisfied, I am supposed to do something else, and then it does that, right? So if not tea, then coffee. right? So if I had a simple if and I said if yes, give t, for no, it wouldn't give you anything, right? But in an if else, I could say if yes, give tea, else give coffee. So in an if else case, it knows what to do when the condition is not satisfied. Okay. And then you can nest these. So you can have nested conditions, nested if else. And what does that mean? That is just a condition within a condition within a condition, right? So if man, if height greater than so many centimeters, t-shirt size is equal to large, right? If man, if height less than so many centimeters, t-shirt size is equal to small, right? So I hope I'm making sense so far. So these are conditional statements that you can try and see how they work. Okay, another really nice thing that we can do is take care of situations where we might have a code block, and maybe I want to run this code block many different times, right? So I want to run one code block, maybe say 20 times, 30 times, 100 times, right? I have a list of, or I have a table with 300 values, and every time I see a P, I want to count it, right? So I have, or every time, somebody says that there's a boy, I might want to keep a count and check how many t-shirts I might want, say, for this class, for example, right? So I might want to count how many boy t-shirts and how many girl t-shirts. So every time I see the gender be male, I want to add one to boy t-shirts. Every time I see the gender female, I might want to add one to female t-shirts if I want to give t-shirts to everybody present in this masterclass. And what would I need to do? I will need to run through the entire list of all of the students present here and check what is the gender, right? So any such situations where you have a piece of code and you want to run it many times, you want to use something called as loops. Okay, there are two main kinds of loops that you can do in Python. There is a for loop and there is a while loop. Okay, what is for loop, what is a while loop, and what is the difference between them? So a for loop is generally used to iterate over a sequence, say a string, a list, a tuple, etc. So for example, uh, like I said, if I want to make special t-shirts for everybody attending this masterclass, I already know how many times I want to run this code, right? I might know that I have 800 students, so I will run this 800 times. So for 800 times, run this loop, right? Or for example, I might want to print 500 times. So for 500 times, print this, right? So on and so forth. What about a while loop? So a while loop is a conditional loop where the code block gets executed only when a condition is met and evaluated to be true, and it continues to execute this code block till the condition remains true. So what do you do in a while loop? You give your code some condition, it evaluates the condition. If the condition is true, it will run the piece of code, and it will keep running this piece of code till the condition becomes false, right? So, for example, while age is less than 18, can't vote, right? And so each time, or say each year, what do? You check the age of a person, and as long as it remains under 18, it will keep telling you can't vote, right? And the moment that you get over 18 years of age, the loop ends, right? So the condition is false, the loop ends, right? So that is the main difference between for loop and a while loop. In a for loop, you tell it in some way for how long to run this, right? For as long as this list is, run this loop, right? In a while loop, you will have a condition. Your code will check for this condition, make sure that it's true, and then run. And after every iteration, it will check the condition, and it will keep running till the condition is true. Okay. A few things can go wrong with loops. For example, you could end up with an infinite loop, right? I could say while a is greater than 0, run this piece of code. And imagine what happens if I say a is equal to 100, and I never change the never change the value of it, right? So I say something like a is equal to 100, and while a greater than 0, print a. Okay, so what's going to happen here? It's going to check the value of a, it's 100. It's going to look at the condition a greater than 0, which is true, and it's going to print the value of a, which is 100. What will it do in the next iteration? It will look at what is the value of a, which is 100. Is it greater than 0? No. And it will print the value of a, right? So this is a situation where what we have done is created an infinite loop, right? This condition will never be false. So then you have to just manually shut it down using you have to interrupt the kernel and whatnot and manually shut it down. But the loop itself will keep going forever, simply because the condition that a is greater than 0 will always be true, right? So something like this can lead to an infinite loop, and you must always try to be careful of the fact that infinite loops are possible, and you really do not want one in your code. All right, so it can happen for both for and while, right? So just be really careful while writing these loops that you don't accidentally create an infinite loop. Okay, there are ways to get out of loops, and those can be done using a jump statement, right? So something like if I reach a certain conclusion, I can write in my loop a break statement, so that even if it has still iterations to go, the code will break out of that loop and go on to the next cell block or next code block, right? Okay, so these are the basics of what kind of loops there are and what we can do with them. Okay. Finally, if time permits, I will give you a peek into two really important libraries in Python that you will use all the time as data analyst or data scientist. And these are NumPy and Pandas. And these are very powerful libraries for you to be able to manipulate whatever data it is that you will be working with, right? So Pandas is usually what you will be using to read most of your data and create a data frame with which to work with. And both Pandas and NumPy combined will give you a lot of ways to play with data, have fun with it, slice it, uh, change it, so on and so forth, right? So NumPy gives you a lot of different mathematical things you can do. For example, play with matrices, arrays, so on and so forth. Pandas lets you deal with data frames, and both of them together let you do quite a lot. So if time permits, we will do a quick peek into NumPy and Pandas. And now what I will do is I will switch to my Jupyter notebook, and we will try to go over much of the Python basics that I just discussed, and we will see how the code looks like and what are the different things that one might want to look at. So what I'm using here is a Google Colab notebook, okay, and uh, this is a Jupyter notebook. The extension is .ipynb. Okay, so it works with Python. Okay, the advantage is that I can have different code blocks and I can run them individually, and it's rather useful for a lot of data science related tasks. So you can use a Jupyter notebook locally on your systems as well. You can use something like Google Colab and open a Jupyter notebook, and that will work fine also. All right. So without going into too many details about Jupyter Notebook itself right now, let's try to focus a little bit on the basics of just Python, and then we'll deal with the rest. So assignment operators, like I discussed, you have any variable, and what you can do is assign something, a value or some amount of data to this variable. So that's what the first statement here does, where I just assign a value 10 to my variable a. Okay, there are two ways of figuring out what the value stored in a is. I can use print a, and this is what the syntax looks like. I can also do just a, and then it will print the value that a has, right? I can also change these values. So I can say a is equal to 5, and then if I want to print a, it's no longer 10, it is now 5. Okay, I can store strings. So for example, statement I am from India, right? And again, I can do either statement and I get the string that I stored, or I can do print this variable which I'm calling statement, and the same thing happens, right? And again, like with a, you can change So I can say, for example, I am Jayati. Oh, okay. Statement. And if I try to print statement now, you can see that the value that was stored in the variable statement has changed. So this is what assignment operators look like, and this is how you can do some simple assignments. Okay, so let's look at some data types that we had discussed earlier and see how we can play with those. Okay, so like I discussed, we can do numbers, right? So for example, I have A, I assign it a value 10, and this would be an integer. Now, there is a nice way in Python where you can check the type of your variable, and the function for that or the code for that is simply type, right? So let's see what this gives me. So here it has printed just the type of A, which is an int or integer. Okay. Now can I do a float, right? We discussed this. We said that you can have decimal values, and these are called, the data type is called float. And yes, I can. So for example, B is 3.14, and I can make it a, or I can check the type, and the type is float, right? I can also just try to print B and see what happens. It prints the value of B, which is 3.14. Okay, you can change the type of uh, a data. So whenever you assign a variable some value, there is an implicit assumption that Python makes about its data type. So for example, when I said A is equal to 10, Python decided that its type should be or is int. When I said B is equal to 3.14, Python decided that the data type of B must be float, right? However, you can force data types manually as well. So for example, if I do int B, right, then I have forced a data type integer on B. And since integer cannot support decimal values, it's only going to give me B. And what I can do is, if I make C as int B and I check the type of C, you can see that it is an integer, right? So you can force data types onto variables manually by telling Python that no, I don't care if I typed 3.14, I want it to be an int type. And then you might end up losing some information. For example, I lost my 0.14, but maybe I'm doing some work which requires everything to be int, and this solves at least that problem, right? And you can play around with it. You can do int to float, you can do float to int, and see how things work. And I highly recommend you to try playing around with, you know, converting data set. So this is called an explicit conversion or explicit right. You basically explicitly telling Python what the data type of your variable should be. All right. Now let's have a quick look at strings. So I make a variable str and I assign it this string. So this is a sentence here, this is a string. right? And I can print it, and I can try to look at its type. So str stands for string. Okay, one thing to notice is that when I had 3.14 or when I had a is equal to 10 is one entity, right? But when I look at this is a string, you have the sense of the fact that this is not one entity, right? These are all these different letters which are put together. There is spaces in between, right? So I can have it's more than just one thing. 10 is one whole number. This is a string, is while one string has all of these different parts to it, right? So in Python, I can now try to look at these different parts. So for example, I can maybe try to print what is just the first member of the string, right? So if I try that, let's see what happens. So I have here str1, and str is my variable. With using these square brackets, I tell it which variable or within my variable, which index I want to refer to. Okay, so this is a string, is a string which is this long, right? It has so many different characters in it, right? And I can access individual character by indexing them. So I can say the first character, second character, so on of this string. But what happens when I actually say str of 1, you notice that it gives me h, which is actually the second character. And this happens because Python starts indexing from 0. So if I have 0, now you see that I actually get the first character of my string, right? Okay, you can also create ranges in Python. So for example, I might want to say, give me everything from the 0th character to the 5th character, right? So I can do that using a call here, and this will give me this space. So space takes up actual space in memory. So the 5th character of this string is an empty space. Okay. If so, I can do this in all sorts of different ways. So maybe I don't want the first 5, right? Maybe I want, say, maybe from the 3rd to the 7th character. Okay. So I can do that. So this means from 3rd to the 7th character, and that's what it has printed. Okay. If I want to print everything till, say, the 2nd character or the 5th character or the 8th character, so on and so forth, right? I can also just skip the 0 here, and I can type it like this block here. So string of colon and 2, right? What does this do? It starts from the beginning and goes on till 2. So maybe let me say 6, and let's see what happens. So you see that it has printed the first 6 characters of your string. Now I can also find the length of this string. There is a built-in function in Python to do this. So I can just do len of str, and the length of my string is 16. So if I wanted to print the entire string using something like what we have been doing here, I would have to say str colon 16, right? And now it has printed the entire string. But I can also do this without knowing the length of my string. How do I do that? Well, the logic or the syntax is quite simple. I just do str colon, and let's see what happens. It prints the entire thing. And in a nutshell, what this code is telling you to do is to say, okay, start from the very beginning and go up to the very end. Okay, so I know now how I can print the entire string. How to print the first one is pretty clear, right? I would just say str0, and that would give me the first character of my string. I know how to print the entire thing. Okay, what about if I just wanted to print the last character of my string? So in this case, I know the length of my string, right? So I could just say str16. And why is this out of range? Because again, remember that Python starts indexing from 0. So if I do 15, now it gives me the last character of my string because it starts counting from 0, right? So the length is 16, but the last index is 15. All right. If we did not know how long the string is, or maybe you don't want to run into errors like I did just now where I typed 16 and I knew the length and I still typed the wrong index, right? You can also, instead of doing 1 to 15 so on, just use -1, and let's see what happens if I do this. And when I do something like this, it basically means, or it tells Python to start at the end of the string. So doing -1 will actually give you the last character of the string, whatever that may be, right? So for example, if I try, say, another string, so I live in India, and now if I did str16 or 15, chances are that I'd end up with the very wrong thing if what I wanted was the last character of my string, right? So if I just do -1 now, I get the last character of my string. Okay, so you could do the same thing with all the numbers. So you could do, for example, str1 -2, and that would give you the second last character of your string. Okay, and then you can play with how you might want to index these different ranges, so on and so forth. So for example, I could do everything till the very last thing, so it stops right before, right? So I get I live in Indy and not now, right? So these are all the different ways in which you can index and access parts of a string, right? Okay, so let's just go over this code as well. So for example, here I'm just printing the entire thing. Okay, what happens here? So this is still almost the same string, but notice that I have an extra blank space at the end here. So let's just run this and try to print the length of my string. you see that it is now 17. So just because to you it looks like redundant space does not always mean that Python thinks so. I put in a blank space there and it is saving it. So another thing to just keep in mind when you are working with strings. All right. Now, remember earlier when we defined objects or we defined these data, I said that we could change what the value is. So for example, here A is 10, but then what I can do is simply add code block and say A is equal to 9, and the new value of A will now be 9. I can do this to strings. So for example, I can do str1 I live in India, and then say str1 is equal to India. And now if I print str1, the value has changed, right? Okay. Similarly, if I run this code block here, the value of str1 has again changed. What I cannot do is change individual characters of a string, right? And that is what you see here. So for example, if I just print str2, it tells me it's I. But if I want to change it to say capital I cannot do that. Okay, so this is something that you cannot do in a string, which is you cannot change individual characters of a string. All right. So again, this is just starting from the fourth character and going all the way to the end of the string. So if I want to start from the beginning of a string, I leave the first part empty. So I start with colon and then say 4. So start from the beginning and go till the fourth character. And if I switch places, I'm saying start from the fourth character and go all the way to the end. All right. What are the other things that we can do with strings? Are I can, for example, search in a string, and Python can tell me if a character that I'm looking for or a string of characters that I'm looking for belongs in a string that I have defined. So for example, is the are the characters string in my string 1 as I have defined? And you can see that it is there, right? And Python can tell you this. So you can check if something belongs to your string or not. And the code for that is simply in. So I say string in str1 and I run it, and it tells me that it is in fact true, right? Okay. Strings are also case sensitive. So for example, if I look for capital STR in my string str, you can see that now it shows me false, even though if I just print str, you can see that string is there and str is also very much there, but they are in not they're not capital letters. So these are in fact case sensitive. So for example, if I did str, now it's true, right? So for example, I could do th and it's true, but I change T to a capital T and this is now false. right? So even though H is part of my string, capital T is not. So this string H is not a part of str. All right. We can also look for things or look for characters in strings, and the code for that is find. So how do I do that? I say str.find and I tell it what to look for. So I say look for string in the variable str, and it tells me where I can find it. Right? So for example, I could look just for the letter T, and it tells me that T is at the 0th index, right? Or I could say O, and it tells me that A is at the the 8th index. Okay. What if you had something that was actually not in your string, right? What would the function do there? So let's just try it and see what happens. So I have str.find, and I wanted to look for capital S in str. And as you can see, capital S is not present. So let's just see what happens. If something is not found, it returns -1. Okay. We can also play around with strings. So for example, if I wanted to make everything uppercase, I could just say str.upper. And now you can see that it has made everything into capital letters. And maybe just as homework, or when you have some time to play around with strings a bit more, see how you can turn everything into lowercase. All right. Now let's have a look at lists in Python. So let's see. All right. What is a list? A list is, well, a list, right, of different things. So for example, here I have L, and I define L as a list of things. And what are these things that I want in my list? 1, which is a number, 4, which is a number, and 2, which is a string. So actually, just make it. Okay. And you can see that while defining a list, what we use is square brackets. All right. So let's see, can I print it? I can print it. Can I check its type? So let's check type of L, and tells you that it's a list. All right. Can I index or access individual items in a list? Yes. So for example, I can check we'll come back to that one. Okay. So for example, I can ask what the second index is, and again remember that Python starts indexing from 0, so we give 0, 1, 2, right? Okay. Now, just like strings, I can check if something belongs to my list or not, and the code remains the same. So for example, I can check if 2 belongs in my list, and in fact it does. Now, one thing that you can do in a list is that you can change individual elements of your list. So for example, I can make the second index of L is equal to 2. Now if I try to print L, you can see that my list has changed. All right. So now I have a list of 2 integers and 1 float. Earlier I had a list of 1 integer, 1 float, and 1 string, and you can go and change individual elements of a list. You can also extend your list, so I can add an element to my list, right? So the code for that looks something like this. So I say l.extend, and what do I want to add to my list comes within square brackets. So let's see what happens here. It has now added to my list. All right. You can do all the usual slicing and indexing of things in your list. So for example, I can print the third element, you can try to print the last element, the first element, so on and so forth. Okay. The next data type that we look at is a tuple. So a tuple is defined using these curly brackets here, and in a sense they are also a list. We will see what is the main difference between a tuple and a list momentarily. So first let me just run this. Okay, so when you do these round brackets, Python will understand that this is in fact a tuple, and I can do the usual indexing. So I can say t1, right, which is 2. But what happens if I try to change it? Can I change it? No. And this is one of the major differences between a tuple and a list. Remember that in a list we were able to change the elements. All right, we were able to change the elements. In a tuple, that is not possible. All right. However, very much like a list, you can have different kinds of data types in a tuple. So for example, here I have int, float, and string, right? And again, this is a type tuple. Let's just print it to see what happens. Right. Can I still access individual things? And can I change things? I cannot. All right. One thing that you can do is, if you have a string, you can make it into a tuple. So how would you do that? Let's look at that here. So I make 3 into a tuple. So let's just see what happens. And let's just see the type of T now. So what is type of T2? It's a tuple. And what it has done is it has taken each character of my string and made it into an element of my tuple. Okay. And much like everything else, we can now look at parts of this. So just from 1 to 4, for example, or everything, right? I can also check for membership in tuples. So for example, is 1 in T1? Yes, it is. Is T in T1? No, it isn't, right? Is string T in T1? It's not, right? And then similarly for false. Okay, so with this, we have been using in for a while now, and we see that, this gives us either a true or a false. So let's try. Okay, why is T not in T2? Simply because you have the string T, and now if I try looking for the string T in T2, you can see that it is true. Okay, Let's assign this value that in is returning to a variable. Okay, so I have here x, and x takes whatever value this statement gives. Okay, so I say x is equal to 1 in t1, and then I want to print x, and you can see that the value is true. What kind of data type do you think x would? And x is another kind of data type that, while we have been using, we have not really discussed so far. And let's just see what Python tells us. So let's see type of x, and type of x is actually a Boolean value. So what is a Boolean value? You can think of these as either 0 or 1, right? If something is false, you get 0, or you want 0. If something is true, you want 1, and that is Boolean. So it can just take either true or false, and that can be 0 or 1. And how can you assign these Boolean values to a variable? You can use something called bool. So for example, here I have f is equal to bool of 0, and if I print f, you can see that 0 means it's false. Similarly, if I try 1, you can see that this is true. So this is also a data type, and it is called bool, or stands for bool. All right. Now, when you have tuples, you can count the number of elements that occur in this tuple. You can count, for example, how many ones have occurred, how many threes have occurred, how many e's have occurred. So if I look at my T2, I can see that it has the elements T, H, R, E, E, and I can ask Python, or Python can count these elements for me. And the way to do it is using count, and I tell it what to count. So T2 dot count all the E's, and it will tell me that it has 2 E's, right? Okay. What about if I say something which is not in my term? So what happens if I do T2 dot count 1? And then it just tells me that the number of ones occurring in T2 are 0, which is in fact the case, right? And you could do this with all of them, and it will give you the answers. Okay. I can also ask it where things are. So for example, I can say where is T. Okay. Now, what went wrong here? E, remember, is I have asked it not as a string, whereas what my tuple has are strings. So all it says is that E is not defined. Okay. But can I look for, say, T2 dot index? Let's try T. And you can see that it tells you that the index of T in the tuple T2 is 0, right? So the difference between these two here is just that you need to make sure that Python can understand what you're asking, and what it has stored are in fact strings. And when you do it without the brackets, it doesn't understand that you're asking for string E, and it just tells you that E is not defined. Okay. What about if you ask it for an index of something that is not there. So it just gives you an error and it tells you that in fact X, what I was asking for, the index of what I was curious about, does not belong in my tuple. Okay. Now, again, here you might think that T belongs to my tuple, but in fact, 3 is the string that belongs to my tuple, not the individual letter T stored as a string, and hence the error of X not being in my tuple. Whereas if I look for 3, you can see that it will then belong in my tuple. All right. With tuples, you can also unpack them. So, for example, if I have T2, you can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements in my T2, right? And if I want to unpack them and say that, okay, each individual element of my tuple I want to store in a different variable, I can do that in Python. So I take 5 variables A, B, C, D, E, and I simply equate it to T2. And what it does is assigns the values that are stored in my tuple to these variables that I make here, right? So for example, if I print A, it now gives me just T, right? So if I print, say, E, it will give me E. Okay, unfortunately, let's print E, and you can see that it gives me the string E, right? So you can unpack tuples like this in Python by just declaring new variables, right? And then equating them to the tuple. All right. And then these behave just like your regular variables. So for example, I can do type of D, for example, and it will give me a string. So in fact, I have a tuple of strings, right? Just like with lists and strings, you can check the length of tuples. So the length of T2 is 5, right? And you have already seen that you can index individual things in a tuple, so on and so forth. Okay. Now we come to look at a very interesting data type in Python, which is a dictionary. And I think given the time, this might be the last thing that we discuss today. So let's talk about what is a dictionary in Python. Okay, so we can define dictionaries in Python, and these are in some sense unordered lists. And what you do is you take a key, for example, in this case 1, and to 1 I assign the fruit apple. I take another thing, I call it 2, and to 2 I assign the fruit banana. So let's just run this. Let's see if I can print this. So this just gives me a list with a key, and for each key it tells me what that key stands for in some sense, right? So if I try to print the type of D1, you can see that that Python tells you that it's a dictionary, a type dict, right? Okay, what does this mean? How is this helpful. So it just means that I can say things like what is second or what is associated to two in my dictionary, and it will tell me that it is a banana. Right. It doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So, for example, I could say first name and then Jyoti and say last name and then make it Kaushik, right? And maybe now you can see that in fact what I have done might be a little bit more useful. So when I do 2 now, you can see that it doesn't really know what has happened because it has no idea what 2 is. In fact, what I have done is I have changed the keys here which associate to itself some information. So first name is the key. The information associated to that here is gender. So the 2 gives me a key error. It doesn't understand what 2 is. And if I just change it to last name, it gives me caution, right? And this is can be rather useful anytime you want to establish some kind of uh, lists or some kind of a bijection, so to say, between things, right? Say in my data set, first name and last name makes sense for whatever I'm doing, but the data set that I have collected gives me Jayati and Kaushik. So what I've done here is said that the first name will be Jayati and the last name will be Kaushik. And in fact, you can keep adding to these. So for example, I can add another key, which is, let's say, 3 here, and I can call it orange. So, okay, let me just say best fruit. Okay, and now if I try to print D1, it has some extra information. It has one extra key, best fruit, and the information associated to it, which is orange, right? So these data types are called dictionaries and can be extremely useful in a lot of different use cases. So you will often see them once you get a little bit more into data science. I have personally used them when I have worked with natural language processing. I have used them when I have worked with other different kinds of data sets, something called as graphs in Python that you can define or make using dictionaries and so on and so forth. So with this, what we have done is we have covered the very basics of Python that you need to know before you can start doing much more in it, right? So these are all the real building blocks, so to say, of Python that will be useful for you as you embark on your career as a data scientist or a data analyst. And with only 5 minutes to go, I suppose it doesn't make sense for me to start loops, does it? And Anjali, are you there?
Yes, Jayati, I'm here.
Right. So I think there are only 5 minutes left. So is
Yes.
it okay if
S-
we do loops in the next class or?
yes, we can do it in the next class. Yes,
Okay. So
yes.
then the way that we'll go on with this is that we'll do loops and other data science things for Python in the next class. I'll then stop here.
Yeah, sure, Jayati. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jayati, for such a
thank you so
detailed
much.
session. I'm sure the students, who had a lot of doubts and were scared, and they would get idea right from the basic to advanced. Yeah. Any questions? Anybody who wants to ask any question related to today's masterclass session on data analytics with Python?
So if there are any questions,
Yeah.
I'm happy to answer those now. I think I'll just
Okay.
stop my screen share for a second and maybe look at the chat. So
Okay. Yeah, sure. One of the students, Aman, has asked what will be the topics covered in next masterclass. Okay, we will share it with you, Aman. We will share it with you. Yeah.
definitely we will cover how loops happen in Python and then everything else as well. Anything else that is any questions related to today's class?
Okay. Yeah. I think we will gather their doubts, Jayati, and we will
Okay,
collectively address all their questions in the next masterclass.
that
Yeah.
that also works. Thank you
Yes.
so much, Anjali.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jayati, for taking up today's masterclass. We are looking forward to the next masterclasses. So thank you so much for a detailed session on data analysis with Python. Yeah.
Thank you.
I will just share the attendance form in the chat box. Please fill out the attendance form. And also, we will share all the important links related to today's masterclass. We will share the PDF of today's masterclass, the recording as well, on your email as well as WhatsApp groups with all the spokes. Please share all the important resources and the recordings of today's masterclass on with your team members as well. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's masterclass, uh, both on Zoom as well as YouTube. Yeah, I just wish you happy learning. Please ensure that you are finishing your learning plan before 10th of July. And we will also start working on collecting your profiles for Jivitam, which is for placement opportunities. So thank you everyone for attending today's session. I wish you happy learning. See you in the next masterclass, which will be on Sunday.